Tell me how you really feel. Let's talk about emotional masking. What's up, y'all? My name is Elia. I'm a mindset coach. I talk candidly about my journey, as well as share tips to encourage growth and healing and uplift anyone who may struggle with feeling seen. So, what is emotional masking? Well, first, before we get into that, I want to kind of throw one caveat in there. So, the term masking, you will most often see it used in context to neurodivergence and specifically people who are on the autism spectrum. That's not what we're talking about today. The word is not exclusively to be used in that context, but I do think it's important to kind of throw that out there because more often than not, that's just what you're going to see. So, when we talk about emotional masking, what we're talking about is suppressing or hiding your true emotions, the true needs tied to those emotions, and your true self that is a result of those emotions and needs. And sure, emotional masking, it's intended to be a self-protective measure. Ultimately, you want to protect the more tender and vulnerable parts of yourself. That's the goal here. That's the whole point of this. And it can be a conscious or unconscious thing. It's usually an unconscious thing through learned behavior or repeated negative feedback or traumatic environments or experiences. So at some point, a lot of folks just decide, or not even decide, but learn implicitly to not show up fully because that then can feel safer. And altering how you show up in the world to fit in or be accepted, at points you have to move strategically. Don't get me wrong. You can't be 100% raw all the time, but it's important to be authentic and fully yourself as much as you possibly can, because at some point there's going to be discord or friction internally between your true self and the self that you're presenting out into the world. And this is an unhealthy coping strategy to deal with challenging or overwhelming feelings or challenging circumstances or situations. And the real challenge here is that it makes it nearly impossible to actually get the needs that are tied to those emotions met because nobody knows what they are. They're not being expressed. And it makes it very hard to build genuine and intimate connections because there's that mask there. And over time, this can lead to a lot of anxiety. This can lead to emotional and psychological distress because there is a person within you that wants so badly to live freely and be expressed, but there's this wall, this mask that is blocking that from happening. So that dissonance, that energy, that friction, it still exists and it has to go somewhere. So, as always, my goal here is to humanize this stuff. And to do that, I want to share a little bit about what this has looked like for me. So, a large struggle throughout my life was feeling like I didn't fit in. The irony to that, though, is I never really had a problem being liked or having people drawn to me. That was never the issue. It's just feeling like I fit in or really had my tribe or really had spaces where all of me could exist and feel honored and feel safe that I didn't have. And I was desperately searching for it. I just didn't have it. And over time, I developed this belief or internalized this belief that something was wrong with me because I always felt out of place or different or just like felt like the black sheep or the one who was kind of, throwing things off if I was really honest and showed up fully with what I needed and how I felt about things. And that was also reinforced by how some people treated me when I did show up fully, when I was fully vulnerable and expressed those needs and emotions. So it was a bit of a self reinforcing thing. And over time, I learned implicitly to suppress my emotions, particularly my negative emotions, because getting the needs that were tied to those more challenging emotions met did not feel like a safe thing. Actually, advocating for myself and showing up fully in moments when it maybe wasn't convenient to people or just challenged them, that had never been a safe thing for me. So it didn't feel like something to choose to do in a lot of situations. And I forced myself to have this really positive outlook on life. And here's the thing, I actually have a pretty positive outlook on life pretty much all the time. I think it's constructive to have a positive or opportunity or growth focused outlook on life. But let's also be real, nobody is happy all the time. There is such a thing as toxic positivity. And at points in my life, I just forced myself to be positive when there was nothing in me that felt positive. And that caused a lot of friction within me because I wasn't honoring the feelings in those moments that were trying to tell me that there was something wrong or something that needed my attention or that I just needed to shift. I wasn't honoring that. And I would shift how I navigated in spaces, don't get me wrong, to feel included or feel like I was accepted or fit in or whatever the case may be. But over time, that just came to be exhausting. I found myself overwhelmed, exhausted, depleted, and burned out, and felt like I was being who others wanted or needed me to be, but not who I needed me to be, and not even who I wanted to be. And that just wasn't sustainable. So I had to make some changes. And this is, of course, ongoing work. There's nothing ever completely finishes. We're always doing the work in perpetuity. But I do want to share a few tips that have helped me do the work on my journey in hopes that they'll help you on yours. First, it's important to identify and actually feel your emotions. It's important to really bridge that gap between your mind and your body because your body or your emotions, they're trying to give you information. And sure, we can think through these emotions, we can cognitively intellectualize them, and we can name them all day. But if we don't feel them in our body, there's still this gap between what's really going on and what we're telling ourselves is going on. So it's important to be able to identify, name those emotions, but also feel them in the body and see where tension or aches or whatever, increased heart rate, whatever it may be, that the body and the mind need to agree on and get a shared understanding of. Second, it's important to practice self compassion in anything that challenges us. It can be very easy to kind of look down on ourselves and beat ourselves up, and this is no different, right? Walking through the world and not feeling like you can be your authentic self or that you can show up fully, and then also having to deal with the fact that you're choosing not to show up fully, that can take a toll on your mental health, your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth, your identity, all of those things. And it's important to honor that reality, but in a compassionate way towards yourself. Why add to any of that weight that masking already makes you carry? Why add to any of that weight that the world already makes you carry? You can be compassionate towards yourself and still honor that this is something that needs to change. Thirdly, it's important to practice sharing vulnerably in relationships or spaces that don't feel threatening. And I know this can be hard because it's also challenging to actually find or cultivate those spaces that don't feel threatening or that feel even remotely safe. But by practicing being vulnerable in increments or stepping it up, if you will, that will allow you to get a gauge of what's going on internally, but also how safe the environments or relationships around you really are, in hopes that maybe you can actually build a space where you can show up fully authentically and really let your true self out. It's also really important to practice self-soothing techniques, and that can look quite a few ways, but the challenge here again is showing up authentically and trusting that that's going to be received and feel safe. The thing is, you showing up authentically might not be received well. That's just a risk that you gotta take. No, everybody's not gonna like you, and that's okay because people are different. Everybody doesn't have to like you. It's important to still be willing to take the risk to show up fully and being able to soothe yourself through the stress and the challenging emotions that come up with actually taking that risk and stepping out into that light. So, practicing self soothing techniques, whether they be breathing exercises, other somatic exercises, maybe give yourself a nice hug, whatever it may be. This can look a lot of ways, but it's important to actually practice those techniques. And then lastly, it's important to seek and accept help. What that help looks like, only you know, but that may be in the form of talking to close friends you can confide in, family that you can potentially confide in, or even seeking professional help. Whatever that looks like, it's important to really seek and accept that help, because after prolonged periods of masking, things can get really jumbled and it can take a lot of work and a lot of effort to really realign yourself with yourself and feel authentic and feel fully you and feel like you're really showing up. So, with that said, of course, as always, I want to leave you with one reflective question. And today's question is, what does emotional authenticity look like for you? Think about it.